Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of In Lay Terms. This is episode 254, and we are airing on, what is it, Friday, February 6th, 2026. I always come prepared. We're joined by the wonderful Bath-Sheba Vandenberg. Bath-Sheba, how are you?
I'm good. It's funny that you had to check what date it is today. I've had a couple people today not sure what day it is, and they say, "Oh, I just don't know what day it is." There's just so much going on. It's hard to keep track.
I stopped counting the years after Y2K.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's why I had to check. I'm still on, I thought it was like 2025 or 2024, but we're at 26.
Well, I think people are so traumatized by what happened in 2020 that it's sort of like I think there's a new BCE, and it's the sort of the before COVID era. We can remember everything clearly, and then after it's all a blur because there's just been so much change going on and oppression.
Yeah, it's like it was year zero.
Yeah, it is actually the year zero in some ways.
Yeah, everything changed. I'm still it's not that I'm not over it, but this isn't over. It's been 6 years of hell, and they've trampled our rights. They've misused us, abused us, and people are just like they're reaching their breaking point. And I'm wondering, I'm looking to see when that is and what it's going to look like.
I think, yeah, a lot of people are wondering not just what people's breaking point is, but what's the breaking point of the whole makeup of people, that society of our system, and it just seems to be uh, quite complicated, and uh, this is not legal technical words, but I have to repeat what my dad said about what's going on. He said the system's constipated. And I think that's true when you overcomplicate things. And he's a man who used to teach biology and horticulture and knows just about everything under the sun about plant life and animal life. And so he's just like, it's just too complicated. It's not sustainable. So people are wondering, yeah, well, what does it take to to break it then? And if we look at the collapse of empires, there seems to be a couple of flashpoints, and one is becoming too big, and another is too many taxes that people just find it unbearable, and then start to rebel in whatever means they can. It's just we're living in a time right now where it's difficult to rebel. And when I say rebel, I mean rebel like take matters to the court, take matters to tribunals. It's difficult to do that just because of how big government is at the moment, and the amount of resources that they have to use against us in all of our fights, our legal fights, our protesting, our writing letters to MPs and MLAs. We just seem to be crushed in all areas.
No, it's a good point. I was watching The Lincoln Lawyer last night. It's just fictional, but he said something like $100,000 retainer and then another 100,000 moving forward. And I was thinking like access to justice is a really big problem in Canada anyway.
Access to justice is a huge problem, and I was mentioning yesterday to someone that one of the things that we've overlooked is that we don't have enough courts. As our population has grown, and not organically, it's grown overnight, and growth is, of course, a good thing in some ways, but it's unsustainable if we don't have the infrastructure. And we've seen the impact on how many kids are in classrooms, and that's really difficult for teachers. We've seen the impact in hospital capacities. We don't have enough health personnel. We don't have enough hospitals. So those are very clear areas that touch everybody's life on a daily basis. But the justice system or the court system doesn't touch everybody's life. And people, I don't think, have turned their minds to the fact that we have a lot more people now in Canada. And so we have a lot more disputes. I mean, that's natural. We have a lot more disputes. And as a result, there's a lot more cases and litigation going on before the courts. And the courts are just overrun. And that's impacting judicial decision making. That's impacting how cases are heard. For example, in family law in Alberta, there's been a complete overhaul where matters need to be dealt with by way of arbitration or mediation before you can even set foot in the court. But that's a huge cost. Like, you're going to pay $10,000 retainer to your lawyer, and then you're going to pay a $10,000 retainer to the arbitrator. Meanwhile, you're paying tens of thousands more dollars in tax money, which is meant to go to building the infrastructure, which is more courts, right? And it's just, I see the signs everywhere, and I'm just wondering how, like, when is this going to end? When I say when is this going to end, is in this sense of oppression. And another thing is that there's been just so many regulatory changes, and I feel that these regulatory changes are the sort of workaround to handling litigation issues outside of the court. So you have these statutes set up, and then they create their own little like administrative law tribunal system where there's no rules of evidence. I quote a counselor from yesterday in one of those tribunal settings who said, what's great about this tribunal setting is that the rules of evidence that they have in the courts don't apply here. And she actually said, that's the beauty of these proceedings. And I just thought, wow, no, it's ugly. It's ugly. And it's egregious that we don't have standards applying in administrative proceedings where the decisions directly impact people's livelihood.
All right. Well, let's start. Is it all right if we go with Bath? If I just call you Bath?
Bath is fine. Yeah. That's
All
totally
right.
fine.
Bath. Let's start with right there with the tribunal. For people who have no idea, what is a tribunal and why does it need to exist?
Yeah, why does it need to exist? I like that question.
It's a nice loaded question for you.
This is why. I mean, the why is sort of lawyers don't like to speculate it, but I did kind of give a little bit of a reason why I think that there's more issues being set aside to be dealt with in tribunal rather than court is because there are just not enough courts. And maybe there's some other unknown nefarious reasons. I have no idea. But the how, it's just the executive. So the government is basically delegating decision making to these tribunals, essentially. And these tribunals are meant to be seen as independent, but I just don't understand, quite frankly, how a tribunal can be seen as independent when it's set up under a government framework with no rules of evidence or that apply. I mean, the only thing that applies to a tribunal is procedural fairness, which is supposed to apply, but nowadays it seems to be that procedural fairness is more safeguarding the government than it is a person who's impacted by government decision making. So a tribunal is, I'd like to say, was supposed to be the sort of a set aside structure that operates like a court, but it's not a court. And because it's set up under some rules, it's a totally different system, and every tribunal will look and operate differently. For example, I'm dealing with 3 different tribunal matters at the moment, and I have been given permission by my clients to speak about their cases. One is an Ontario Land Tribunal matter. And there's a separate statute governing the Ontario Land Tribunal, and they have their own set of rules. In those proceedings, they do not record the proceedings. There's no transcripts, and there's a one person, a chair, that makes the decision. When we look at police disciplinary tribunals, they're governed by the SBPPA, it's Statutory Powers of Procedure Act in Ontario, and depending on which police service, there may or may not be rules that govern the process. And again, there's one person who is the decision maker, and they are normally a retired or superintendent who is governing and making that decision. Then we have what happened yesterday. I say what happened yesterday because I can't believe it. It's actually referred to as a tribunal because the processes of the applicant or appellant going first and then the government responding was reversed, and there was no opportunity for a true cross-examination, and it was basically no rules govern the process. It's totally the discretion of these three counselors who make up the committee of this so-called tribunal. So that, I mean, it depends on what the statute is, what the government mechanism is to determine what type of tribunal people are going to face. But it's anything to do with administrative law. So anything that falls under statute, or bylaw, or anything that's government related, essentially, which at this point in time in Canada is just about everything.
I was gonna say, like, what's the end game to basically roll up everything that's currently in the courts and put them in these half-assed tribunals?
I don't know, but that's what more and more of that is what's happening. Like, the more regulations that you get, the more boxing you get, sort of like saying this is going to be an area that is totally regulated under the statute and the regulations, and then if they give the government powers to ticket people, issue tickets or charges, that end up either can go into what's called, like in Alberta, the traffic court, which doesn't just deal with traffic tickets; it deals with tickets under, for example, the Public Land Act regulations. It can deal with tickets under other statutes. So it's not just the Traffic Safety Act, and or it can be where it's just at the level of nuisance, for example, trying to appeal a nuisance abatement order, and you're under the rules of the bylaw. It depends, really, and there's so many rules and to read, like nobody cannot navigate through that. No
Sounds
one.
like the building code.
Yeah. Yeah, well, normally with that, you would go to court, right? You could sue in civil litigation for defects or whatever with your house or something like that. But it's an area of law that I practice, and a lot of people that go through law school absolutely hate administrative law. It's not one of those courses that lawyers like, and it's because it just seems so arbitrary. It's not like this civil litigation, right? Like when you go to courts, you have a set rules of procedure, and it's like what the rules of warfare are, right? And then you can kind of have fun with it because you are on an even playing field against your opposing party in the civil litigation matter. I mean, even insofar as the rules, they apply equally to both parties, and it's like having an honorable war in a way. But with the administrative law, you just know you're already on the back foot. But what's really sad is that you're on the back foot as a taxpayer. You're on the back foot trying to right a wrong committed by the government. And I sometimes ask myself, like, what's in it for the government? like for these decisions, what's in it for them? Like they are not gaining anything from this. And their decisions are taking away rights of Canadians, are impacting their livelihood. They have to pay for lawyers to have some kind of degree of procedural fairness and representation to feel heard. Right? Like what's in it for these people? These people being the government workers, the government decision, what's in it for them? Do you know what's in it for them?
A salary.
Well, they're going to get paid either way.
I'm reminded of Star Trek. In Star Trek lore, there's this race called the Cardassians, and the way their justice system works is they find you guilty, and then you go to trial to prove why you're guilty. It's like a performative theater.
That is funny because, in a sad way, I think that's kind of what happened yesterday with appealing the nuisance abatement order. There was so many things that went wrong with yesterday, and we've got 15 days before we get a decision. But in the meantime, I'm going to have to issue my first human rights complaint here in Canada, and I want to. And it's kind of nice that you have me on your show today because I can share this story of just how sort of inhumane I find these processes to be. So a bit of my background is I used to do human rights internationally, and I've lived all over the world. And in Canada, some of the culture here I find is not what I thought, or seen examples of kindness elsewhere. I mean, it's just I'm seeing behavior that is not an example of kindness or empathy or respect for others. I mean, it's just cruel. It's cruel. And so what happened yesterday is that I asked for an agenda ahead of time of, what will the day look like? And I was told, well, that's at the discretion of this tribunal, the committee of the three councillors. And we show up, and I discovered that they haven't read any of the materials. So they took a break for 15 minutes to read 600 pages, right? All
Speed
600
readers.
pages. And then there was no set schedule for when we were going to take our morning or afternoon break or lunch break. And you've got to remember that I'm plowing through this. I've got a binder this big. I've got questions. There's all these witnesses that are being presented by the county, and I wasn't allowed to cross-examine. I was only allowed to sort of question via the chair. And at one point, I was totally stopped from asking any questions, even though it was like going to the weight of the evidence. And then it was like 2 p.m. and I was absolutely famished. Like I was having a meltdown. And the thing is I'm hypoglycemic. I don't like to sort of make a big deal out of it. I tried to manage it, but it does mean that I need to eat, and I need to eat regular meals. And if not, it affects my glucose levels. And the symptoms that I have are almost the same as somebody who's diabetic. So what happens is I get shaky. I start losing my cognitive capability. I have very low energy, headache. And if I reach that point of a crash, it's sort of the fault line. Like that's it. Like it's going to take me a couple of days to recover. But the soldier in me will try to soldier on, to my detriment. But at one point, it was because of the level of unfairness, and the amount of fighting I had to do to preserve or try to preserve procedural fairness and represent my clients. It hit a point where at 2 p.m. I stated, like, I've not had lunch. There's been no lunch break. I would like to ask for a break. And I saved on the record, there's been no accommodation. I'm hypoglycemic. I don't feel well. The chair stated, okay, we'll take 12 minutes.
12. That's a very strange number.
But get this, right? Yeah, kind of arbitrary. 12 minutes, 2 extra minutes, because breaks could be 10 minutes, but we'll give you 2 extra minutes. Right. So this building, the municipal building, is in the middle of nowhere. There's no restaurants nearby. The building has no canteen, and there was a vending machine. And the only thing I could eat from the vending machine was a bag of chips. So they're expecting me in 12 minutes to scarf down a bag of chips, and that's going to make me feel all right.
Sounds
And
like a loser lady who got high off the least amount of power in the universe.
I have no idea, but I do know that they were eating because in between the little 5 minute breaks, the 1 or 2 5 minute breaks that we got from 9:30 to 2 p.m., I saw the counselors come in like chewing. So I knew that they had a little nibble here and there. And I just, it's a procedural fairness issue, but it is a human rights issue. So any kind of medical condition, and it doesn't need to be uh, like a documented medical condition. If you need some kind of accommodation, they have to give it to you. It falls under the Human Rights Act, disability.
Can I ask a question about this? Contrasting that with something that I would consider to be far more severe, the Coots Four being held in remand for 3 years. Do they
Mhm.
have a human rights? Can they make a complaint? That seems like torture to me. What they did to you is also technically torture, just not at that scale.
Right. Yeah. So the thing is that human rights complaints are can only be made within 1 year, and there's also not much relief provided. It's more sort of declaratory, and they tried to do conciliation before, and you might get 5 or 6 grand out of it. Uh, so with human rights complaints, again, it's a 1 year time frame, and with regards to what would be a Section 12 of the Charter, that inhumane and degrading treatment, well, then they are entitled to make charter applications for sure. I mean, when I think about the Coote situation, I as a human rights lawyer who I visited a few prisons in the world to look at the prison conditions, and I was advocating for uh, proper prison conditions. I often think how did we let this happen in Canada, where people were in pretrial detention for that long and in such inhumane conditions? How do we let it happen that peaceful protesters and such as Tamara, right, was put into 30 days of pretrial detention in a remand center, which is worse conditions in the prison? Drinking water from a shower head. I've heard stories of um, they're flagging the prison officer to say, I need to use the toilet, and they're not allowed to use the toilet. There's been, in my view, treatment of people here in Canada that is torture, that is inhumane and degrading treatment. And unfortunately, the legal process is so slow, and sometimes I just feel like we don't have the right tools here in Canada to properly fight for our rights. The charter rights, in my view, are just not enough. And what we've seen is even when the courts find there to be a charter breach, the government doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
I'm very, very upset and disturbed by the Liberal government's refusal to acknowledge that they acted unlawfully in 2022, and they violated our human rights, and they are showing no respect for the judiciary either, because it's two courts now that have stated that they have violated our charter rights, human rights. I mean, they don't call it human rights, but that's fundamentally what freedom of expression is an
That
international law
that's kind of where I
reference.
wanted to go. We agreed there's going to be a hard stop in 15 minutes. I want to hit two more topics. One is the Emergency Measures Act appeal. It got upheld. They said again that it was unlawful. What do you think is going to happen there? I mean, everyone's saying there's just going to be no justice.
It's not just that there's no justice, it just seems to be like the judicial review was pointless. right? So the legal process existed and came out with the right conclusions, the right ruling. But what is the meaning of a legal remedy when there's no impact on changing behavior? I mean, we got to think more discerningly about what is the point of law? Like, why do we have law in the first place, right? To regulate to our to regulate our behavior insofar as being respectful of one another so we can all coexist, but not to the point of totally stripping us of some of our fundamental rights. The law is there to protect us against overreach and abuse of government. I mean, those are sort of romantic ideas that I have about law, rule of law, and um, but the law at the moment now, as I see it, is being used as a sword, not a shield, and it appears to be that our government don't have any respect for the rule of law, and so when people feel helpless and hopeless, I think that we need to not give up, and it's important to have these conversations. That's actually key. So I saw that MP Andrew Lawton is really pressing the Liberal government for an apology or for recognition of the court's decision. Uh, I mean, people, if people really want to get politically engaged, and of course, it's going to be a battle. Like, look what we're up against. It's not going to be like a, hey, MP, I want you to respect the rule of law, or I want you to respect this decision, or I want you to say sorry. It's not like in this today's environment they're gonna be like, okay, I'm gonna do what you've asked me to do. People need to appreciate that it's going to take a lot more standing up and I'd say pestering almost, a polite pestering, like writing letters to the MP, going to the MP's office, maybe staging a small protest outside of the MP's office if they haven't responded to the letter. I mean, how is it that the UK, and I know there's a lot of issues in the UK right now, but there are some success stories. Like the UK, Starmer was going to roll out this digital ID. And then an MP prepared an open letter signed by other MPs, presented it in Parliament, and guess what? That whole rollout of that program has stopped. It's not going to happen. There isn't going to be digital ID. And then when we look at the COVID-19 vaccination mandates that they were going to roll out in February 2022 for all NHS, so that's National Health Service, that was going to come into effect on February 1st of 2022. But a bunch of doctors and nurses and other health professionals and other people supporting them protested and did everything they can do to say no. And so it didn't happen. So although we're sort of like, yes, we're like, oh, what's happening in the UK is awful. What's happening here is worse in some ways. Like we haven't reached that point of that they have, because those laws are, being debated at the moment in terms of C9, for example, and criminalization of like posting something on Facebook 20 years ago. But we haven't had any successes in terms of a change that reflects a positive change that reflects us coming together and saying enough is enough. Like, we need to do more, and we need to do more together. And it's not about conservative. It's not about NDP. It's not about Green. It's not about liberal. It really isn't. It's not a left or right thing. It's about doing what's right.
So the last thing I wanted to ask you before we kind of end the episode, to the extent that you can you tell us regarding the case of Helen Gruss, Detective Helen Gruss?
Mm-hmm.
Imagine someone has ever heard of what she went through. Like, what exactly did she do? What are they claiming? And also, like, what are they claiming she did? Because to me, it seems like she was doing her job, and now they're punishing her for for doing the right thing, whereas we can't punish them for doing the wrong thing with the Emergency Measures Act. But those are my words. You tell me what happened.
So what happened, and thank you for that question, because I think that her story has been misrepresented in the public at times. Um, she was not conducting an investigation. That's really important. She was not conducting an investigation. She was certainly not conducting a criminal investigation. And all she was doing on January the 13th of 2022, on that morning, was probative, basically asking questions. In the police speak, that's probative, is asking questions. So she heard about the doubling or tripling of sudden unexpected deaths in infancy in infants. It's called SUDI deaths. She heard about that from her team at the beginning of January 2022. And people were talking about it in her unit, a unit responsible for investigating these types of deaths, because it was unprecedented. And so, and they didn't know why. And so she took it upon herself on January 13th, because she is a police officer within that unit. It's within her discretion, her police discretion, and within her mandate under the Police Service Act to protect the public to uh, to look into why these babies died. Was there a pattern? She looked to see if there was like a pattern. Was it, like there was a pattern actually identified in 2020, and it was put on the record by one of the police officers to say that there was an increase of baby deaths that year because of the COVID-19 lockdowns, that people were opening their windows and their babies were falling out. And so there was an increase, very tragic. There was an increase in that year because of, so there was an explanation. It wasn't because there was something like, a COVID-19 vaccination rollout to pregnant and breastfeeding women that had never been tested on them and actually showed that it would kill your babies. So Detective Helen Grews never drew the conclusion that it was because of the COVID-19 vaccinations. She was asking the question, is that doubling or tripling relating to the COVID-19 vaccinations of pregnant and breastfeeding women? Based on the information that she knew at that time, which is the fact that Sick Kids in Toronto had just published a direction on treating children with myocarditis, because they knew that because of the COVID-19 vaccinations given to children that there would be an increase in myocarditis. This isn't conspiracy theory. It was Toronto Sick Kids Hospital directive. And Detective Helen Grews, a couple of weeks after reading that directive, knew about, in her unit, about a baby that had died with an enlarged heart, myocarditis, suddenly in mother's arms, which is unheard of. Babies don't die in parents' arms, right? There can be a situation of smothering or, in some criminal cases, baby shaking. And also baby shaking was something that came to being after after a pathologist and police worked together to figure out, oh, these babies are actually dying because they've been shaken to death. And the same kind of curiosity as to why are there so many babies that have died is something that Helen was looking into, because that's her job as a police officer.
Can
So
I
she
ask?
wasn't investigating. She didn't say, oh, I'm going to investigate this. She knew she had to gather some more information, but she was suspended 2 weeks later.
No, I got to ask, because most of us, we have no idea how law enforcement works. So we watch like Law and Order or something. You see the detective with the cork board, and but if there was an increase in deaths of Latino women in the lower mainland of Vancouver area, it's not illegal for a detective to kind of try to ask, like, why is this happening? Is that illegal? I'm trying to understand.
It's their job to ask what's happening. It's their job. It's under every police statute to preserve life, to protect the public.
Right.
And you know, some police officers, they say, well, you know, I'm not a medical professional, so yeah, I'm aware that there's issues with the COVID-19 vaccinations, you know, but I'm not a medical professional. It's like, yeah, so when somebody's been murdered by some kind of chemical, does a police officer walk away from the murder scene saying, I'm not a medical professional, I'm not going to deal with this, you know? No, 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 I'm not a medical. No, they work with the pathologist, they work with a panel of medical experts to figure out, to ask, why was this, how was this person murdered? And
Beth, this is the
it's
question I
common
have. I want to get.
sense.
I wasn't in the courtroom, so what did the prosecution say with a straight face to the judge, and how did the judge agree with that? Because to me, it seems like she did nothing wrong.
Yeah, I know that. I don't know how people can do that. Honestly, that this is why I'm just like, what's going on in Canada? There's just payment throughout the hearing. I was just, and I did actually put it on the record. I was like, we need to be more compassionate, and it just shocks me that there's been such a persecution and a prosecution of Detective Helen Bruce, and we're forgetting that there's been a double to tripling of baby deaths that's still unexplained. And if and I put on the record, I did the pattern analysis compared to the clinical research that was published by Pfizer. I did it within 9 months of May 2021 and January 2022. There was a tripling of SUDI deaths. And those babies died in circumstances identical to the clinical records of the Pfizer vaccine, COVID-19
Sorry,
vaccine.
we got less than 5 minutes,
So I said,
but sort
I
of.
can probably go and I only need 10 minutes to get to where I need to get to. So
But like my question is the same. I use the example of the whatever Hispanic women. The Payment Ascari, Detective Ascari wants to know why there's an increase of deaths of Latino women, Hispanic women in the Vancouver area, and then I investigate. It turns out it's wrong. There isn't an increase. That doesn't mean that I did anything illegal. So if it turns out whether she was right or wrong that the babies are dying, whatever the reason was, I'm struggling to understand what she did that was unlawful.
that's right. It's not that it's not unlawful. It is considered misconduct, discreditable conduct. I mean, the Ottawa Police Service are basically sending a message to the entire Canadians that they don't want police officers to use their police discretion to protect us. That if they do it, if police officers start asking questions that might implicate the responsibility of government, that they will be that amounts to misconduct. There's a new standard in the Ottawa Police Service now for discreditable conduct. And
Okay,
what that is
so
if you ask questions of government that might implicate government responsibility, then that's misconduct. So that's telling us that the government are above the law. And by the way, in your scenario, it would be, and which matches Helen's, would be, you know, Detective Ascari is working in homicide. You know, it's within his remit. And Detective Ascari knows, based on, you know, the local expert in the area, that those women are vulnerable groups that are targeted by a certain you know, criminal organization, let's just say. So Detective Ascari is using his police discretion, informed police discretion, to ask questions because he has a duty to protect everybody in the public.
but again, so to tie it to my example, Detective Ascari is looking into the suspicious deaths of vulnerable women, and then my superior officer says, Payman, let it go. This is connected to some very, very powerful people, and they hit me with misconduct. So misconduct is basically just a blanket term that they can just apply to anybody at any time.
Well, discreditable conduct is actually starting to be used like that because there is no definition. Discreditable conduct is essentially it is bringing it's a conduct of the police officer that would bring the police service in disrepute. So it's looking at what do the public expect from an objective point of view of a police officer's conduct. So this is why this case is just so backwards and unusual, because people expect police officers to take care of them and to be asking those questions. And so misconduct is really supposed to be about negligence. So negligence and negligent behavior, for example, a police officer failing to press charges, right? A police officer that actually one, Payman, it's so absurd that one of the cases, and it's the Crown and Beaupre at a Supreme Court of Canada level, one of the cases that the hearing officer quoted to say that there's a limit to her discretion actually states that politicians should not interfere with police discretion. And the Crown of Beaupre is about a guy who did not, a police officer who did not press charges because he knew the guy. So it was an abuse of police powers on that level of discretion. Helen was not even like, she wasn't writing warrants. She wasn't at this reasonable probable ground level. She was simply asking a question, asking the question, looking into the records management system, saying, is there a pattern here? And then flagging it the very same day to the chief of police, and then getting suspended 2 weeks later, having her badge taken off her on a rumor, by the way. They took her badge off her for alleged insubordination, for using the records management system for personal reasons, for printing a coroner report, none of which was held to be true. And then these 2 CBC articles came out in March, and which is why she was then charged with discreditable conduct.
It drives me insane.
Well, yeah.
Well, unfortunately, we got to end the episode. I know you got to get going. I appreciate you coming on. I wish I could have controlled my emotions a little bit better, but this Helen Bruce thing, it really, I don't know, it gets me really angry, even more so than the censorship bills. Maybe could you tell the audience, is there any way that people can follow you, or you're not a public person?
I'm not a public person at the moment. I'm thinking about maybe doing some writing on Substack and potentially getting an X account, but not just yet at the moment.
Any way people can send resumes to your law firm?
Yeah. Well, anybody can reach out to me, and Helen's case is continuing on May 19th, a 3-day penalty hearing. So watch that space. The prosecution are asking for a 2-year demotion, which is absurd. Discreditable conduct. If we look at some police officers that have been found guilty of discreditable conduct for negligent and actually for quite some not very good conduct, they would get like 5-day knock off their pay. And they're asking for 24 months of demotion for a police officer that has an outstanding performance record, who is due to promote to sergeant.
It just doesn't, for the full pound of flesh.
Well, I just think it's incredibly punitive, and Payman, that's why I asked the question: what is it? What's in it for them? I mean, sure, they're getting paid money. You said salaries, yeah, but they get paid money for any case, for any job. What is actually in it for them? How can they sleep at night?
I don't have an answer for you. Some of the whistleblowers I've talked to, they might, but I don't want to say it on the record. I'll tell you after we go off the stream. Ms. Vanderberg, thank you very much for coming on, and I hope you make it to your appointment on time.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on your show today.
Always a pleasure.
All right. Have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.